Hello, thank you everyone. Hi, thanks so much for being here. By way of introduction, my name is Sophia. I'm one of the student planning leads for ClimateCAP. We are so excited to welcome you all here for this series of talks. Our first session of the day is on changing hearts and minds and engaging stakeholders in climate action. I'm joined today by Noah Wilson-Rich, the founder, CEO, and chief scientific officer of the Best Bees Company, Connor Freze, the former design director of climate for IDEO, and Amos White, the founder and chief planting officer for 100K Trees for Humanity. Each of our speakers today will take about 15 minutes to talk about their work and how they go about changing hearts and minds. And then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. For this audience Q&A, we will be using the Q&A function in the WOVA app. This will be the case throughout the conference. You can get comfortable with it now. If you navigate to this session in the agenda tab of the app, you should see a Q&A button where you can start typing in questions. I encourage you to type in questions throughout the presentation, and then in the last 15 minutes, I'll hop back up here and I'll ask the most asked questions live for our speakers to answer. Okay, great. Thanks so much. I'll kick it over to Noah to get started.
Thank you so much. Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Right on. Okay, I'm Noah. Thank you guys for having me. OMG, first speaker of the conference. Okay, here we go. Let's get pumped. All right, so I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. If any of you were lucky enough to score some honey at the registration desk, that was from my company. That was from the bees that are here on campus. That was from the bees that you see up here. I have a PhD in bees and then went right into the unemployment line. I was like, why didn't I go to business school? Oh my God, it was a recession. I was a bartender after that, and I was working at a business school lobby. It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The business school was called HULT. It's an international school. They had a business school bar to train people on how to do deals in like the British way at a pub with pitchers of beer. It was really weird. I was listening into what they were saying and learning about business just that way, okay? I'm self-taught. I started my business, the Best Bees Company, while I was a student with no money and a Facebook page and an idea that I threw against the wall with nothing to lose. And I'm 16 years into it, and we're now a national multi-million-dollar company. And you can too. So I'm going to just start off with my ask of each of you, which is to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's going to be the best way to stay in touch. I'm Noah Wilson-Rich. I'm a nice guy. I don't bite. I love to mentor. I love to answer questions, especially as it has to do with finding a career path, especially as it has to do with climate and sustainability, which is now a dirty word. The federal government of the United States is still a client of mine, and I know from my contacts there that they have recently had to go through their emails and delete anything that says the word sustainability or else lose their jobs. I have decided, as has my team and as have my contacts at the government, that we still need to do this work. And so we are doing what is called code switching. We are changing the vocabulary, okay? So what I want to share with you, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, just getting to the new vocabulary in this new era here in 2025. Sometimes when we need to drive big change, when we want to change hearts and minds, which is the point of this session, we need to do the work and stay focused on that work at hand, stay focused on the mission. Don't get caught up in the labels. You can call me Michael, you can call me Sarah. My name's Noah, but it doesn't matter. I'm still here and I'm talking to you because I'm focused on the work. So right now, if we have to say efficiency instead of sustainability, so be it. If we have to say risk management instead of biodiversity, great, let's do it. Maybe this could actually make things a little bit stronger, because even if you're a CEO who cares about sustainability and you want to drive big change at your institution, sure, you can do it, but what if you get fired for it because it's just not done in the right way? If you're not connecting environmental sustainability with economic sustainability, you might be missing an opportunity, right? I had a therapist who would say, conflict, what an opportunity. And I would hate when he would say that to me. But maybe this is one of those things. Maybe this broadens our perspective and allows us to reach more people who see bees. What? bees are going to sting me and they're going to kill me. I hate bees. Just pave over everything. We're here at Berkeley. You're looking outside. This is designed purposefully. There's a concept called biophilia, which is when people are surrounded by nature, we feel better. There's data that show that we're more productive. God forbid I mention that there are data that show that diverse teams outperform homogenous teams, so teams that are all of the same type of people. When different team members can spot blind spots and shine light on things, we have a broader perspective, and so we can outperform. So diversity equals performance. It's just broadening the vocabulary to change hearts and minds to get the job done, okay? I'm going to bounce back a little bit here about the Best Bees Company. So we are a beekeeping service. Remember, I had this weird degree in bees. I've got over 20 scientific publications. I wrote a book about bees with Harvard and Princeton and Oxford. Like, who cares? It's not changing the world. And that was really what academia was about. Get publications, then everything's good. It didn't work for me, and I wasn't buying it. And I think that's why each of you are here today, too. You really want to make an impact, and I believe that you see business as the best driver to do so. And I don't think that for-profit is a dirty term. I think it's a way that we can make more of an impact in a way that helps to thrive. And remember, thriving ecologically tied with thriving economically. They go hand in hand. That's why we're doing this at a business school. This is a great business school, and all of your schools too. So I also want to do an ask. I am doing more speaking events at different business schools. I started doing this at Harvard Business School, at MIT. We did send bees into space. Again, why are we doing this, right? I'll get into that in a little bit. But if any of you are connected with other events like this, ClimateCAP is the premier one, reach out to me through LinkedIn so we can make it happen. Now, we install beehives to collect data. When I look at a bee, I see a data point. Our honeybee hives are not about honeybees. It's about information from the environment. Bees are all around the world. And so I chose to work with bees because they're this global bioindicator for ecosystem health. So breaking that term down again, a bioindicator, it's like a canary in a coal mine. It's telling us about how the ecosystem is doing. Are we listening? And as business leaders, if you're not listening to biodiversity, if you're not measuring it, if you're not aggregating data and reporting on it to your stakeholders, then you have a blind spot for risk. If you have a flood, if you have a wildfire, if your employees can't get to work, if you can't move your goods and ship them to the customers, your business cannot function. And that's why we need to pay attention to nature, because it's a risk. And when we don't measure our impact on nature and our interaction with it, when we're looking at our operational landscape, you're going to fail because you're just not taking this seriously. We live in the context of the broader world. So when we install honeybee hives and manage them at home gardens or business rooftops, or here it's on a hillside, or federal campuses anywhere, these are connected beehives as a network of indicators for the environment. Bees fly for about 5 miles beyond the hive, and they visit flowers, and they bring information, data, back into the hive in the form of honey, which is what you're tasting here. When we look at the plant DNA, or the environmental DNA, sometimes called eDNA, sometimes called BDNA, that's a little pun. There's a cool company called Nature Metrics that does this with the mining industry. If you want to look at your environmental impact, this is a technology, eDNA, that helps companies measure biodiversity as it connects to their business risk. And when we do it through honey, this edible science, edible reporting, I know it's a little weird, right, when you're eating honey, but if you're a real estate company at an investor meeting and you taste your asset, right, what? That's weird. But it gets attention, right? This is different. When you taste it, it doesn't seem so threatening. Well, there's a sustainability. No. This is data aggregation and reporting on risk management. But when you're tasting honey, if you're a real estate company and you have different assets, different properties across the country, and your investors are there, and around the back of the room it says, oh, here's your Chicago address, here's your New York City address, and there's honey from them. And your report is in front of it. And it's looking at all the different plants that we found from there. And you can install a green roof on the top to extend the lifespan of the roof, to save money. By insulating your building, you lower your HVAC costs. There's different ways to talk and present based on who you're talking to. The Obamas brought bees to the White House, and the Trumps kept them. You know, it's like Pence brought bees to the Naval Observatory, and Harris kept them. Bees are a bipartisan issue. Sustainability in the planet is bipartisan. It is. It's just a matter of understanding the new vocabulary and how to deal with it. And you don't need the money, and you don't need the network or anything else to do it. So what I want to lead you in here is how to drive change management as inspiration from a beehive, so that when you see a beehive, you don't have to be a bee nerd, PhD like me, to see a bee as a data point. But what I do want to do is shift your perspective. I want you to see a beehive as a source of inspiration, as a corporation that's been around for 100 million years. Bees have been around for 100 million years. If you see a beehive as a society, a complex enterprise, you start to understand that they've learned some lessons along the way. And we humans have been around for tens of thousands of years. We're just starting out. We have a lot to learn. Every non-human society on the earth is female-dominated, female-led. There's no queen bee. There's no queen wasp. There's no king bee and king wasp. Female-dominated, except for the United States. Like, it doesn't even matter what we choose. It's just not going to happen much longer. The biology of females, and I'll get back to the point in the message here, but we need to understand this, is such that females invest more in eggs. Females have a limited number of eggs. So they, by nature, have to care. They are less risk averse. And we can move on from humans here, but where males' sperm is cheap is a constant line. When we're thinking about risk taking, risk management, risk mitigation, we can take inspiration from nature just by looking at a beehive. And when we're at Harvard Business School's beehives, they put them on a deck just like these, so that when you're meeting with your group of team students, you can look out at these and you can take inspiration from their teamwork. So what I want to do here is allow you the knowledge on how to be inspired, how to drive change management from a beehive in 5 easy steps. And you can too. First off, the queen bee, it's kind of like the CEO, except really, the CEOs don't have that much power. Take it from me. I've been doing this for 16 years. My team drives it. Same thing with the honeybee queen. She's kind of the leader, but she needs to be there. But beyond her presence, which is sensed by a pheromone, she doesn't really drive it. The power is in the workers. And even though some workers might feel powerless and say, oh, I'm not an executive, workers drive the company. Let's be real. And so when we think about a social system, we think about the different roles. Honeybee workers have different roles, just like a society. There are also solitary bees that do it all on their own. And for solitary bees, they have to just trust themselves to know that what they're doing, that's it. Nobody's coming to help them. But that's not what an enterprise is about. And what we're going to do here is acknowledge these solitary native bees, as they're often called here too, and we're going to take time to respect them. When you see an individual bee out there, you know, okay, that's one who doesn't have any workers. She's doing it on her own, not he. When we think about a society, a honeybee hive, and how they drive big change, how they forage, how they go to find a new home to live, they're doing this because a worker has found a new place to live. That worker has changed up its routine. So if you are trying to drive big change, you need to make a discovery first. What is the change you want to make? The first thing you need to do is discover it. And that's what we do here. We're going to use this example of finding a new home. When a bee finds a new home, it's a hole in a tree. She walks around and measures it. She comes back and she dances. She's like, hey, this is a really cool place to live. It's actually like this, the waggle dance. It's a bzzz, and then she turns around. She shakes her butt, and then it's bzzz. And this was Nobel Prize winning research in the 70s. I swear, Carl von Frisch, okay? The waggle dance. It communicates information. Where is the new location? What's the quality? So where's the direction? The quality is the vigorousness. And the distance to fly is how far that waggle is. It's amazing stuff, right? All in a little beehive. The second step is when that discovery is made, she, this waggling bee, tells her friends, her closest bees. And those bees then bump her in the head and they say, got it, stop dancing. So if you want to drive big change, make the discovery, tell a few of your colleagues. Once they know your information, you need to stop. It's out of your hands. Don't keep going, you will be annoying. That will hurt your credibility and that will not help change happen. These other bees are listening in and they got it. They know where to go, they're going to validate. And if they validate it, they're going to come back and they're going to repeat the dance too. And that's how the message spreads. In a beehive, only 5% of that society needs to reach a consensus in order to drive change. In humans, it's about 20%. We're not as evolved yet as bees. But if you're thinking, I'm one worker, how can I make big change? Don't think you have to convince everybody. You only need about 20%. Even if some of you want to go into politics, find your 20% cohort and you can do it. So once you got that, then you've got these people or these bees that go around and say, we're going to have big change, get ready, meet outside. And then the last step, so that could be like a town hall meeting to say, hey, change is happening, everybody come to this meeting. And then step 5, when the bees swarm, they leave. They're guides, kind of crossing guards, say, hey, we're going to go this way. And that's kind of like if you send out a message to say, here's the protocol. Here's exactly what's going to happen. I've got managers, and you're doing the whole operation. So that's your change management in 5 easy steps. All right? And you can too. So in closing, how to build a climate legacy is really important to remember that teamwork, unity, trust, they're so essential. We are social creatures. We cannot live alone, even though you can do it alone. Sure, it's really difficult. It doesn't have to be that hard. And you can take inspiration and lessons from nature that's been doing this for many millions of years longer than you have. And when they fail in nature, they die. We get to do it over again. So there's a lot of inspiration from nature that also can be brought in to inspire your teams. And there's different ways in your legacy to be creative for those edible reports. So that when your green teams and your investors come together, your investors are like, yeah, cool, but how about the bees? Like at Novartis, one of our clients, they get so frustrated because they're doing so much with innovation, sustainability, and green stuff. And all the president wants to know is, how are the bees? They're like, why do you ask about that? And it's because it's engaging, with the honey and different charismatic things. So think about the queen bees. Think about the workers in your organization. Think about what it's like to be in the different roles. Think about the decision-making that goes into all of that. And remember that trust and honesty can lead to successful group change. Kind of like luck. I always say that's when opportunity and preparation meet. This is just a review slide, your 5 easy steps. So find something new, tell your friends, and then shut up. Let them go validate. If they can validate the idea independently of you, then there will be something like a town meeting. Everybody gets together, say, hey, there's going to be change. Come to this meeting to find out. Disseminate what that change is going to be. And then you've got these drivers, managers, crossing guards, people to bring everybody forward. All right. At Best Bees, we're doing a lot of this with biodiversity data, as I mentioned, smart hives. Those are data sensors, data reporting. If you want to learn more about these, I would be so happy to continue the conversation. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up here and pass this on to, I think Connor's going up next. Me? Yeah.
Hello.
I'm trying to get to your slide.
All good.
There we go. Here, I'll let you hit the next one.
Sweet.
Thanks, guys.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that talk. My name is Connor Faris, and I am here to bring a little bit of a design perspective into changing the hearts and minds, which is essentially what I've been doing since I graduated from business school about 6 years ago. Before we get into that, a little bit about me. So I grew up in San Francisco. I live in Oakland. I'm very proud to call this place home, because I think that we are surrounded by some of the most magical ecosystems in the whole world. And so this is a really, really special place to be in for however long y'all are here. I did my undergrad at University of North Carolina. I graduated from the full-time MBA program in 2019 here, almost in this room. And then since then, I've been working at IDEO. I started in the health world, but otherwise, by and large, have been focused on energy, renewables, energy infrastructure, some urban-focused projects, and then kind of broadly climate. I'm sure a lot of y'all are considering consulting or have been consultants, so you understand how it is to be a consultant, in that I have done a lot of work with a lot of different types of clients. And it's all, for me, vaguely focused in this kind of business development, winning and securing partnerships, but then also figuring out how to develop strategies and new product design and new product offerings for different organizations, mostly in the consumer goods space, and also in organizations trying to think about internal innovation and kind of entrepreneurship. Outside of work, I'm a photographer and illustrator. I work with clay, and I name that because all of these photos that I share are all of mine, and I think it's very important as we start to tell the stories of the things that are important to us in the work we want to do, that we show how we see the world and that we're reminded of the types of things that we want to save and protect. So a little bit of some of the projects that have been particularly exciting to me. I have worked with the Earthshot Prize, which is Prince William's big climate fellowship. We helped design their 6 or so month accelerator program for all of their startups. I've done a similar program with the Rockefeller Foundation, building the Big Bets Fellowship, where we decided to focus really specifically on the Amazon basin, which I'm happy to talk about the strategic decisions that led to that, a really phenomenal opportunity. I've been in East and Southern Africa working with Conservation International to scale rangelands and rotational grazing programs across the continent. Worked with CSAA, which is a AAA insurer here, to source new innovation for wildfire resilience, and also hometown heroes like KQED, which is our local public radio station, thinking about how to build more resilient strategies in the face of a quickly changing media landscape. So I've had the opportunity to work across a lot of different things, mostly in the climate space. And what I see, which I know all of y'all see, is that changing hearts and minds has always been complicated, and it's just getting more complicated. In my mind, there's a couple of things that really speak to that. So obviously, we've got the regulatory and societal headwinds that we just talked a little bit about, changing day by day. I think some of the early things that have led sustainability kind of product innovation was people were like, oh, you know, you'll pay more for a more sustainable XYZ product. And I think that the jury's kind of back on that, and the willingness to pay does not seem to necessarily be consistently there. We talk a lot about what we call the enshittification of just the world these days. I mean, it's beautiful. We can get anything we want whenever we want, but it becomes very, very hard to develop new products and to stand out in any kind of marketplace. And even if you have a really cool new product, global distribution, I can't tell you how many good ideas I've seen really fail because it's hard to get the amount of resources you need scaled at the manufacturing scale that you actually need to distribute globally. And so I think that's honestly where a lot of really good ideas fail. And then there's complicated goals. We talked about biodiversity, which is sort of off the radar, I would say, for a lot of conversations. You know, we're really focused on carbon, then maybe water, but people aren't really thinking about necessarily ecosystem services, biodiversity. It's just complicated, the success metrics and the messaging in all of these spaces. So with that in mind, the core question that I was like, okay, if I were back in my business school mindset, either thinking about starting something on my own or going to work within a company or organization, and how do I think about unlocking this long-term impact given those constraints, I kind of thought there would be maybe a 3-step process that I would offer y'all to think about that I hope is helpful. I tried to make it as tangible as I could because that is at least, was helpful to me as a business school student. Like, what's the framework? So the first thing is to understand what is available to you. You know, in any good process, any design process, you're going to be thinking about your research step, right? And for this and for y'all, I think there are 3 things that I would really be thinking about. I would be thinking about the materials that I have available to me that's very, very different than even 5, 10, 15 years ago, the technology, and then the stakeholders where I really want to intervene in any kind of ecosystem. So as far as the materials go, you know, obviously you're probably thinking a lot about regenerative materials, circular materials, some of which we've been using here in this room, seaweed plastic, mycelium, bioplastics, and creative use of waste. We recently at IDEO had somebody come by who's a wool manufacturer, and instead of saying, you know, we're trying to think about new carpets or other ways to use wool, they're saying, hey, we're actually breaking wool down into its components. And keratin, which is one of the components of wool, they're trying to find new markets that they can actually source that circular keratin to replace synthetic uses of keratin. And it's a really great way to say, hey, we have a material that was totally, we didn't expect that we had access to, and we want to find new markets for that kind of base material instead of thinking about its application in wool. In technology, if I were in your shoes, I would be thinking, of course, about AI and other emerging technologies, but I'd also be thinking about how they can be embedded into hardware or other physical products so that you can make those things smarter and more interesting, or extend the life use or change how that product gets used over time. I think about kind of smaller evolutions of materials. Here I think all the time of Mill. I don't know if y'all know Mill, the kind of hyper-designed trash can, but they're taking something that a grinder or a dehydrator and a grinder that used to be big, incredibly energy-intensive, large engines, and putting them now, because they're able to do it at such small scale, into a trash can that can sit in your home. And so we're seeing this ability to kind of change the way that we interact with things because of the type of machinery that we can put in different types of products. And then printing and fabrication, obviously thinking about 3D printing, laser cutting, all of those things are changing what manufacturing and distribution can look like and the types of innovation we can create. And then the final thing is to think about stakeholders. So really trying to understand where you want to intervene in any given ecosystem. I think oftentimes we think about intervening immediately for the end user. So in wildfires, thinking about an app for homeowners, or even thinking about construction materials. But if you really map out that whole ecosystem, you might think that it might be more advantageous to intervene by educating contractors in a different way, or selling something to Home Depot that might be more at the point of sale. So really trying to understand where you want to intervene, whose behavior you want to change, and how to do it then. So from there, you want to go and find the offering that makes you pause. If you've done all of this research, then you want to go generate as many ideas as you can and flip through them and try and figure out what is really novel or interesting or can be iconic in this moment. Now, the tool that we use at IDEO, or one of the tools that we use, is a classic 2x2. And so you can think about using new business models and existing business models, new products and existing products, and trying to fill out as many ideas in each of these quadrants as possible to think about where and how do I want to intervene in this ecosystem. I think one critique I have, and we have at IDEO, is that a lot of innovation has been in this bottom left-hand corner, right? It's about how to make Barbie out of more sustainable plastic, which is, of course, something that we need to do. But as you start to think, in different quadrants, you might say, well, what are the new toys that we can create because they're made out of seaweed? And what is going to be the myth or the story about that toy that we can create and generate excitement around because it dissolves? Or maybe where it lives in your home? Or how we can use technology embedded in a toy to actually add subscription services or make something more engaging or rotating over time. So I would take this as this next step and fill out as many ideas within each of these things. And then I would think about novel value, like what feels like the most novel value proposition. I think what we come from, the perspective we have at IDEO, is not just with Ford and the work around the F-150 Lightning. It wasn't just how do we make an electric truck. It was how do we make a better truck because it's electric? And that little mind shift is what allowed to a lot of key insights around, hey, if we have electricity and a battery in the truck, a lot of people are running their businesses out of the back of that. And so they might use their workbench out of the back of the truck. They might want to plug in their equipment, and it became a completely different offering because of that. The one on the right is some friends of mine from a company called Notplo, which is seaweed plastic, and they did something really cool. They said, okay, we have seaweed. What's unique about that? It dissolves and it's edible, right, as long as you formulate it correctly. So they make these little dehydrated coffee sachets, but because of those properties, they were able to test out embedding sugar in the packaging itself. So you could just dump the whole sachet into hot water and you have coffee, and you have sweet coffee in there. And I think that little thing, obviously you can see how that changes. It's not just trying to hit cost parity with plastic competitors or whatever, but you're actually introducing a new product that meets new user needs and does so in a really delightful way. And for y'all, as you're in this room, if you can find those novel kind of iconic value propositions, I think that's where you'll be most successful. So then the final thing to think about is how do you scale it? And like I said, a lot of companies, organizations, whatever, fail in that they think a lot about short-term wins but not long-term scale, or the other way around. And you kind of, if you want to make climate stuff live in the world, you need to be thinking about both. So here, this is going to be my most business school slide because it has costs and revenues words on it. But it's how I think about things, which is like if I'm trying to make a case to anybody internally, I need to make a case of things that really play on both the cost side of the equation as well as the revenue side of the equation. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's pretty, if you've done any consulting prep, then you've gone through it. But, you really need to think about how you're reducing, how can any product or any idea that you're introducing into the world or into an existing company reduce or make more predictable distribution, reduce the manufacturing costs, either maintenance or new CapEx expenses, things like that. Reducing your supply chain risk, as well as how is introducing new revenue lines, adding new value to your users, increasing your price demand, or changing your customer retention. That's like a lot of really big businessy words, but I guess one specific example here, just to illustrate it, is I don't know how many folks have seen the On spray-on shoe. If you haven't, I think this is a perfect example of something that is truly iconic and we need to run after. So they have these shoes. It uses this self-webbing spray-on technology. So you look at a foot and you spray around the foot and you can create this really cool shoe, which obviously is super cool for the user, right? And has this incredibly customizable, high-performance shoe. But at the same time, you're able to make the case that, hey, we don't need to ship shoes from all the way across the world to get here. We don't actually need to ship material from South America to South or East Asia all the way to Massachusetts to get a shoe to somebody. And we're able to have much more predictable supply chains because we're not running the risk of, ships getting paused somewhere or having a storm or something like that. So there's all these different innovation or ways that you can play on both sides of the equation to really have something that scales and lasts over time. So just to wrap up, these are my 3 suggestions. Number 1, do your research, know what's available to you. Number 2, find the offering that makes you pause and hopefully feels aesthetic. Obviously, I'm a designer, so hopefully it feels aesthetically beautiful and really exciting and meets user needs. And then really build the model and think about it ahead of time of who you're trying to convince and how you can make a compelling kind of super tight argument on all sides of that. And then my last thing is just to get outside, too. This is my little personal note to the MBAs. I know how much time for folks, I think for folks in full-time programs, I know that there's a decent amount of time to explore the world. But, for me, and I think in this space in general, one of the most unique things we have are a lot of people who care a lot about the world and find different value with certain species or certain ecosystems. So get outside, enjoy California while you're here, wherever you are in school, and use this time to really study some of the places that make the world really special, because when you're out of school and you're working, that time is going to be more short. But that inspiration is what's going to stick with you and really make all of the things that you make and the stories you tell about them more compelling. So thank you so much. Here's my email if you need to chat with me.
Hello, there we go. Good afternoon, and thank you. And thank you to our first 2 speakers, and thanks to Haas Business School for putting this on, and to ClimateCAP for inviting us all here. A lot of great faces here. Hopefully you're not too asleep and the cookies have kicked in and the sugar is, no, espressos are down on the first floor. Yeah. So I'll be going there shortly after this. Hi, my name's Amos White. I'm with an organization called 100K Trees. I co-founded 100K Trees for Humanity. We're an urban reforestation nonprofit based right here in the Bay Area, 15 minutes as the crow flies in the island city of Alameda. I'm really blown away 3 different ways. First and foremost, that you're here. There's a couple of you, Joe and some others here in the audience that I've had a chance to talk to. Just asking you guys the question, why are you here? Seriously, why are you here? You're in business. Why are you here today? It's about climate. How are you trying to square that circle? What are you really thinking about? Is it about profits? Is it about money? Or is it about where your next breath is going to come from 5 to 7 years from now? That's the math. So I'm blown away that you're here. It means you're actually struggling, looking at this from whatever perspective and experience that you're coming from. It's like, give yourselves a hand for that. But that means the most to me, that your minds are trying to actually deal with an existential question that we have a very identifiable limited of time to deal with. Those are the questions I want to hear after this in our Q&A. Second, what about me? Well, I'm leading a community-driven workforce development climate initiative that's focused on public health by planting trees. Is this sketchy or is it working? Planting trees in urban communities for climate, for equity, and for public health. Second thing that blows me away is that standing here at Cal Berkeley, Haas, is that this business school students reached out to our organization 4 years ago. I thought it was part of a class assignment, but no, they were hell-bent on making their school sustainable relative to the resources that they were consuming on paper waste, in paper. Where's their paper waste going? How much? Cal Berkeley goes through 400 million sheets of paper a year. I'm sorry, you're sitting in Silicon Valley. That was seriously my only response on the Zoom. Like, what? That's the entire university. The business school here, 40 million sheets, 10%. I was like, where are your iPads? Seriously? Cal? Seriously? And they said, yeah, we're doing something about it. And after I learned about their sustainability program, you guys are literally sitting in this incredible, both building LEED certified, but also it's emblematic of how I think each class that I've come to experience over these 4 years is thinking about business from a sustainability standpoint, from a community engagement standpoint. How's that? Well, they called an urban reforestation nonprofit who plants trees in the communities because they wanted to offset their paper waste by planting enough trees to offset their paper waste per year. That comes down to 600 redwood trees, the largest carbon sequestration machine in the world, 758 pounds of carbon per year. That tree. They have to plant every year to offset their waste. I said, wait, if some of the world's top business future leaders are going to be looking at the world by trying to take on the challenge in front of them. It's not how can I maximize profits, it's how can I do so by looking at my impact and how what I'm learning can be applied towards that. That's what brought our organization on board. And since then, we've been partnering with them to plant trees in communities with Republic Services, who's sitting here today, and others. Both of you are sitting here today. I didn't see your smiling face back there. And that's the picture that you see here. 42 business school people, not one student here. This is all the faculty and admin up at Republic Services in Richmond. This one slide is emblematic of where we're headed in the future. And so they planted 75 redwood trees in 2 hours. 75 redwood trees, 80 redwood trees in 2 hours that day. And that's when our organization committed to really trying to help this school and others look at the problems that you're trying to take on from wherever you are, whether you want to be a quant, or if you're in finance, or if you want to be an investor. How are you looking at this? So, about me, I like blowing past this really quick. We founded this in 2019. This was like my third act. I started out of college wanting to, save the world and go into politics, which I did. I wanted to be an astronaut. I was studying in engineering and maths and poli-sci. Ended up working for Senator John Glenn in Columbus, Ohio, the State House. That was a great gig. Got a fellowship in public affairs in Los Angeles with the Coro Foundation, really trying to make change with and within the community. That led me into marketing and Silicon Valley up here, where I had a 10-year career. But it really was in 2017 that I pivoted out of corporate marketing, if you will, strictly into climate when we got pulled out of the Paris Agreement, 2017, 2018. When we got pulled out of the Paris Agreement, for me, strategically, it was a calculation of, by the world's largest carbon polluter, from the data that I had read and that was out there, to pull us out of the Paris Agreement, where the hockey stick would begin. And we're living in those times. So pivoted out of there, we ended up founding this, truthfully, upon coming out of the global climate strike that Greta Thunberg had called for, that probably some of you even marched in, walking out of your high schools or colleges in 2019. And we saw over 100,000 students in San Francisco who came from as far as Redding, California. They took the bus here just to be with other students, to demand of parents, adults, and government to do something for them for their future. But I knew then, just from learning from political organizing and other campaign work, change starts with you, with one person, the individual. And it only happens when individuals come together to take action. So this is a photo from that march there in San Francisco. And it really did help propel the notion that people wanted to make a difference. Not just adults, but that those of you who now are in business school, who were going to be that future. We knew what the science said. Science gave us till 2030 to cool the planet below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Guess what? This data point was from 2018. 2019, we founded it. I still show this slide. In January 2023, and every month since, we have exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, my scientists on our advisory board tell us all hope is not lost yet. We still need to make significant investments in climate solutions, and we can still do that. The problem is in our urban communities, that means in cities. In cities, dirty air is the problem. 70% of all carbon emissions come from transportation and transit. 70%. And the greatest impact of that is in communities that are the most undertreed. How does that correlate with climate? Well, 80% of the nation's population lives in a city. 80% live in a city or an urban context. Here in California, it's 97.9%. Seriously. So when we have a catastrophe in a city, it is a large, not proposition, but catastrophe. Lahaina happened. Look at Los Angeles. It's not that there's not a lot of room to escape. It's that the impacts are going to be disproportionately higher. We need to be looking at things not just to be mitigating, but looking at how are we going to do business differently, not only to reduce our emissions, but also to draw them down from the atmosphere. Environmental justice is what we're founded on. The hard problem in code switching with DEI is I can't take the tan off. It's not a mic drop. It's a head nod. The way you do business to not quote Mark Cuban, but in thinking of Mark Cuban, sincerely, and in thinking of, name, runs NVIDIA. Excuse me? Yes, thank you, Jensen Huang. That was a test. You're in business school? Right. Jensen Huang. Diversity and sustainability. The core elements within that, not just the intention. Diversity is where you find your strength. I'm blown away and encouraged by the number of women in the room. Most of them are head nodding when they see each other. Guys, you don't get it. Much as I said, I can't take the tan off. Why does that matter? How are you thinking from my perspective, let alone a woman's perspective, when you're making business decisions? Not when you're sitting at the table, maybe even when you're ideating from a human-centered design, but which humans are you centering within that? Environmental justice for us starts with the position and thinking as a Black-led organization, that it's about civil rights and human rights, that we as people of color, we have to fight for our own rights to clean air, to clean water, to access to nature. Just access to nature. Data shows it. And we learned that from our Native brothers and sisters who showed us that water is sacred, that that water is life, that air is sacred, and that the forests shall provide the bounty of life, so as we steward them. That's more than the land of the people upon whose we stand today here in Ohlone territory. That's an indigenous philosophy, belief, way of seeing the world. The same in terms of we and how we make our business decisions. We center, if you will, our strengths. And environmental justice is our pathway to get there. We launched the Urban Greenbelt Initiative of planting 1 new tree per capita resident, and we advocate for that in every urban community across California and across the country. We want to focus on major transit lines, obviously, where the impacts are highest and pollution sources are also the highest. We have a workforce development career model that's linked to tree funding, or linking tree funding to public health goals, not to carbon sequestration outputs, or if you will, goals. So we all know what the problem is. It's a climate in crisis. The question is, planting trees is our solution. Increasing tree canopy, cooling communities, capturing air, or capturing CO2 and cleaning our air. Again, planting trees for public health. Trees for equity. Disproportionately planting where trees have been historically underfunded in communities of color. The benefits of trees, literally from cooling our communities. 1 tree in Coachella Desert, it was showed, can cool the, if you will, the ground in as high as 90 degrees in shading. In our cities, the #1 cause of death and climate change is urban heat worldwide. It's not an externality, not just on the emission sides, but what solutions, nature-based solutions, what financing solutions are we thinking about in business that can help accelerate, if you will, climate solutions in our urban cities? So for every dollar spent on a street tree, it returns $5.82 in benefits in 4 to 6 years. And trees generate, just on green infrastructure, carbon sequestration, removing air pollutants, filtering our air, catching rainfall. 9 million trees generate over $200 million in return on investment. So for every 100,000 trees invested in, it returns $11.2 million in annual revenues. That's the ROI we're talking about. A lot of people just see them as green aesthetics and something that we need, but the ROI is there. It's a political will question and whether or not business is driving that and helping to grease the wheels. So community results is what we're looking for. As I said before, they planted with Berkeley Haas 80 trees in 2 hours. And other schools, from elementary schools to colleges, are also looking at this model, if you will, of just not just planting trees as part of HR engagement, but looking at whether you're trying to offset your carbon emissions or whether you're trying to see where your waste streams impact communities disproportionately, communities of color. That's what we're really trying to impact here with 100K Trees for Humanity. So I just want to leave you guys with, not our partners and friends, but asking you the question, how will you lead? What are you doing where you are? How are you looking forward in the field that you do want to make an impact in business, in finance, as a VC, as an entrepreneur, as an investor? Take that forward, and really looking forward to your questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Connor, Noah, and Amos. It was great to hear from all of you, and we have a number of questions that have already been asked in the chat. I'm going to go with the ones that have been most upvoted, so if you all are in your app asking questions and you see one that you agree with, please vote for it so I know to ask it. I'd love to start with Connor. Connor, you shared about the importance of both short-term wins and long-term goals. With sustainability initiatives, how do you create short-term wins if the organization isn't necessarily bought in?
So, if I'm intuiting correctly, we're talking about innovation within a big company, how to create short-term wins. I think, there's a variety of different things that you can do. Obviously, from with my design background, what I'm thinking about is how you prototype something as quickly as possible. So, can you prototype an experience? Can you prototype a business model? Can you create, oftentimes we think about prototypes of the UX UI version of it, what's the click-through of the app? But I think oftentimes what we undervalue are prototypes of a financial model that might show, what could create value if this were to exist in the world, or what that experience might actually be. And you can bring that experience out to users or even to folks within your organization trying to capture their sentiments and their thoughts on, if this were to live in the world, how would you use it? How would you engage with it? And then the next level I would think about is there are so many little awards, innovation sprints, obviously things up to the Earthshot Prize and the Rockefeller Big Bets Fellowship that I've worked on, but there's so many things like this that are trying to instigate innovation. Aspen Institute also has a big entrepreneurship innovation initiative. So to try and find some of those things that can give you the validation that you need within your organization or company to say, hey, what I'm actually doing, has value in the world. Here's how users are using it, and capture as many stories as you can, because photos, interviews, even the words of your users really speak volumes in that way.
Thank you. The next question is for Amos. We definitely have some business school students in the room. We've been asked, can you describe the sources of revenue for 100K Trees for Humanity?
Sources of revenue? Yeah, where shall we start? Our primary source of revenue is in private donations. We are under, on a per annum basis, we are probably under, or no, we average 6 to 1, half dozen the other, glass half full, half empty. We average probably, about $25,000 per year. Our largest source of funding was $1.5 million for the city of San Leandro in 2022. And our second largest grant was actually a not DARPA, ARPA, COVID funding at 100K.
Okay, thank you. Noah, this question's for you. Can you speak a bit to how you scaled your business? And in doing so, how did you balance pitching the for-profit and the environmental aspects?
Oh, it was so hard. I also picked a business partner who was just my friend. I grew up poor. I approached life from a point of limitation rather than one of abundance. And that means that I just thought whatever was in front of me was the best I was going to get. And so I was living in Boston. I was in school when I started my business, second floor apartment. I actually had bees in the bathtub because that was my inventory, and my roommate would cry as a grown man. He was like, you got to get out of here. You can't do this. I know a guy running a flower business in a warehouse down the street. Move to his space. I did. His business started to close as mine grew, and it was just by telling everybody, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm honest about it. That built trust. And I would take bees on the bus to go to new clients' homes. You don't know what people bring on public transit. It's crazy, and as a scientist, I know it's like lab rats under a sheet. Don't even worry about it, but people are getting by. And the more that you're open and honest about it, builds transparency, which builds trust. And then your clients, my clients, said, I'm going to do this journey with you. And I would say, okay, cool, pay up front. Because I got to buy inventory, I have no money. And they would. I would do 50% upon signing, 50% upon delivery. And I just built it up in a very honest, transparent way. I said, I'm not going to get it right, but you're going to be on this journey with me, and we will fix it. We will figure it out together. And so we did that. In the first, 6 years we were just in Boston. It was so hard to get to New York City, just the next city away. I sent an intern there to go make it happen. New York City swallowed her up. She came back. I'm so glad she came back, Sarah Sanchez. I still remember her like, yeah, it was yesterday. But now we're in 25 cities, and I made a deal. And to wrap this up, I made a deal, an exclusivity deal with an amazing real estate company called Beacon Capital Partners. I got an email from TEDx Boston. Amos and I talk about TED too. I didn't know what TED was. I was annoyed. It took me longer to get on the bus to get there than it took me to give the 10-minute talk. It just went viral. That led to an email from Princeton. They said, do you want to write a book? No, I don't have time to write a book. Who has time to do that? Wrote the book. They sent me on a book tour. I didn't pay for it. Every city I went to on that tour, I interviewed beekeepers to hire. And that TED Talk, that was free, gave me the publicity. And then Beacon Capital Partners, a real estate company, sent me an email, brought me in, said, hey, we know this is happening in Europe. We want you to do it too in 9 cities. I was like, you should do that. I'll do it in Boston. They said, no, you'll do it here. I can sign right here. I was like, cool, I can sign right here too. I got a little cocky. I was wearing a raincoat. I didn't own a coat. And so they said, great, let's sign it. I said, great, we'll sign the deal, but you have to fly me around. They flew me to 9 cities. I had never been to San Francisco when they flew me here. They said, we'll pay you 3 times your list price. We'll donate to your nonprofit $100,000, which is a separate story, but I'm happy to talk about that. And so I didn't bullshit. I was the opposite. I was honest, and people found that trustworthy. And so I ended up splitting off the research. We formed a commercial co-venture, so I'll do that offline. But if anybody wants to talk about how a for-profit and nonprofit relate, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yes, Amos, it looks like Amos has something to add.
No, I just want to give props to Noah. There's one of the things I've heard so much from so many others, older people in business, it's not lamenting that they had, but they say the more honest they are, it's kind of like you attract your tribe. And so finding the right investors, the people who you're more mission aligned with. I mean, we use all these terms and stuff, but how do you find your tribe? It's been 16 years, you said? Yeah, it's not 16 months that some people are hoping that, you're going to spin up an idea, get investment, or you burn it all off and start your next idea. But big props to that for, and just for sharing that in terms of the honesty aspect. I think that's really, really key in terms of building a business.
Thank you. Vulnerability as strength.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I think we have time for one more question. This one came in, Noah, after you flashed up the slide where you showed kind of alternative language for sustainability and DEI. So would love for you to answer this, but it can really go to any of you. It sounds like we're code switching from inputs to outputs, e.g. DEI to performance. To take it one step further, what powerful outcomes or metrics can we use to measure success in the efficiency space?
Right? Doesn't this feel awkward and stupid? Right? It's so identity. And Amos, I love, you're bringing up code switching. You're calling it out from your own experience, and it comes down to listening. Who are you talking to? Are they listening when you talk? And if they're not, don't talk to them. This is what it's like doing work with the government right now. If you're talking to somebody who's not listening, stop. You're wasting your time. But if somebody's listening, and if they're safe sharing, listen to what they are measuring, and then think about how you can bring the data to support what they're trying to accomplish. And so, yes, of course, diversity, DEI, this stuff is so important. Oh my God. And yet, this conflict, what an opportunity. It's a time to think, okay, cool, maybe we're not connecting it enough or something. And so if there is a KPI, key performance indicator, that the person you're trying to sell to, it's their job to report on it. They have to sell more widgets. They have to do whatever. Is there a way, as a scientist, that I think, for me, I can look to the published data and show, hey, teams that are more diverse with this makeup, even just taking all the humanistic DI things out of the room, if we can take out all of those issues and say, more diverse teams outperform in terms of productivity, in terms of less time spent, efficiency, whatever matters to them. One of my salespeople, Renee, says, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we need to listen twice as much. But that's really what it comes down to, just know who you're talking to. Same thing with being on the stage here, just know your audience. Do you guys want to add to that?
I guess, also what I think about, there's a lot of different ways within an organization or a business you can think about success metrics. But to me, I think there is the way you tell your story, and there's the beauty of the product or the offering anyway, that is also embedded in it. Like, bees are so compelling, trees are so compelling, not just because they're good for the environment, but because they're something that people can touch and feel and relate to. They're in a lot of people's stories. People use honey. And so as you're thinking about launching new ideas into the world, try and get out of these really heady, high-level conversations where you feel forced into somebody else's success metrics, and come down into things that people can really touch, feel, see, relate to. Probably a lot of people that you're going to be speaking with anywhere want to get outside. They want to go for a hike. They don't want to be behind a computer on Zoom. They want to be out looking at a hive or walking through a forest. And so try and set the context and tell the story in ways that are compelling and matter a lot to you, and don't feel too much like you have to ascribe to all of these kind of performance-driven metrics, even though it's complicated. Like, sometimes you have to do that as well, but try and do both, I guess.
And also, homogenous teams, you're missing out on entire sectors of the world and society. Come on, this is your hiring pool. This is your sales pool. Like, you're just limiting it to one group, and then a competitor comes along, and they're able to get it all in, and you're like, well, how did that happen? Yet this is how. So we know about this, and that's how we can connect it to business.
Thank you so much. On that note, we are at time. Thank you all so much, and thank you to all of you for your great questions. Let's have a big hand for everyone. Our next sessions start at 3, so check the agenda in the app to see where you want to go next. And thanks so much.
And get some free honey at the registration desk.